Dayrit with the Center for Creative Land Recycling. And again, thank you again for joining us. And we are so glad to be working with DOH and EPA in putting this first virtual Brownfields workshop together. And we appreciate everyone's patience as you're trying to get used to this new environment. So I'm going to go show you what the agenda is like for today. And then after that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Miriam, who's going to just explain a few of the Zoom techniques, what we're going to be applying so that you can ask questions and get used to the Zoom environment. So we have 2 days in this program. We will end today at 2 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. And today we are discussing what a brownfield is and some case studies from around the state. And also later on, we'll have some case studies from other areas in Region 9, which comprises California, Arizona, and Nevada. And then we'll discuss some HERE programs, how you can work with the Brownfields program. And then we'll talk about money. This is the first part of our discussion. We will have more about money tomorrow. So please hang out for both days to find out how to work with your partners to obtain funding. Tomorrow, we will be talking about some technical issues in the morning and early afternoon regarding two real emerging issues, and not just in Hawaii, but in other parts of the country. And then after that, we'll be talking about grant applications. So back to today. What's a brownfield? Well, before I talk about brownfields first, let's talk about what's Zoom. So Miriam, I'm gonna hand the audio to you for now, and you can explain how we're going to go about using Zoom during these next 2 days.
Hi everyone, I'm Miriam Benjamin, the Administrative Coordinator from CCLR, and I have a few Zoom reminders before we get into the webinar. First, please stay muted the whole time unless you are called on during the question and answer session. This is important because any background noise interferes with the speaker's audio. Your camera should be off the entire time unless you'd like to present your question at the very end. If you haven't already done so, please rename yourself your full professional name followed by your organization. On the computer, you can do this by hovering over your own video box, clicking the 3 dots at the top right-hand corner of the screen, and then selecting rename from that menu. Right now, most of you on the computer are seeing through speaker view, which has a big rectangular view of the speaker that takes up most of the main screen, and other participants are in a small banner at the top or side of your screen. If you would like to switch to gallery view, which shows the video of everyone in the meeting across a few pages, then go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and click gallery view. That button will toggle you between the 2 views, and we will be recording this session. Next slide, please, Ignacio. For the chat, you may use the chat to write to the people in this meeting. Open the chat box by selecting the chat button at the bottom of your screen. To send a message to everyone, make sure the blue box in the chat box says everyone. To send a message to someone individually, click everyone and then select the name of the person you're looking for from the drop-down menu. Your chat history will default to the last person you sent a message to. We'll have time for questions at the end, so please write down your questions in the chat box throughout the webinar and we'll get to them at the end. Ignacio, could you switch the slide, please? Ignacio will call your name and ask you to unmute, start your video and present your question. If you would not like to present your question out loud and you're happy with Ignacio reading it from the chat, please indicate in the chat that you would not like to present. If you have any Zoom questions, my screen name is _Miriam Benjamin, CCLR, and please feel free to message me individually and I'll get back to you in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam. This is Ignacio back. And now I'm going to get into my presentation. All right, so about the Center for Creative Land Recycling, we are a nonprofit and our mission is to promote sustainable and equitable and responsible reuse of underutilized and environmentally impacted properties. We educate, advocate, and assist and convene stakeholders like these gatherings. And we are the technical assistance to Brownfields provider, or TAB for short, for the EPA in 10 states and territories, including Guam, American Samoa, and CNMI, who are also joining us on this webinar, as well as on the East Coast, Puerto Rico, New York, and New Jersey. So now on to brownfields. What is a brownfield? Because there is a big question. Many people are still confused as to what a brownfield really is, and if that's a bad thing or a good thing. So is a brownfield a contaminated site? So what would you answer? The answer is maybe. Is a brownfield site on an EPA or a state database? Maybe. Is a brownfield as any site or with redevelopment potential, but has contamination and some liability attached to it? Exactly. The reuse of abandoned and vacant or underutilized properties that are perceived to be contaminated. That's what a brownfield is. And our goal is to help you and your stakeholders use federal, state, and local tools, including grants. And MARC grants are multipurpose assessment, revolving loan, and cleanup grants, which Noemi later will be talking about. So using these grants for reuse. And so another definition of a brownfield is that it is not what's called a Superfund site. Superfund represents the most contaminated sites in the country, which for numerous reasons, the federal government has taken on the responsibility for cleaning up. Many of the sites we find are manageable and can be cleaned up using local or private resources. And these are the brownfields we try to work with communities with to clean up and redevelop. The legal definition of a brownfield is real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So potential is a big word there because what's potentially contaminated to you may not be potentially contaminated to me. And that varies across people. So really, it's difficult to come up with a list of perceptions on sites. But basically, to clear those perceptions, you have to do site assessments and you may have to do cleanup. And many of these sites represent redevelopment and redevelopment opportunities. And there are opportunities to fund the assessment and cleanup of these sites. And brownfields include so many kinds of sites in large cities, small towns, rural, agricultural, you name it, they're found everywhere. There could be a brownfield across the street from where you live. So it's not really something to be totally afraid of. It's actually sometimes many cities use brownfields and that designation as an opportunity to obtain resources from public agencies to fund the assessment and cleanup, planning, and some studies on these sites. So these are what brownfields look like. They can look like practically anything. Many of these, of course, are derelict and vacant, but an open field can be a brownfield as well. And why are brownfields problems? Well, they might attract criminal activity, they discourage investment, they may increase unemployment, they may diminish the quality of life for neighbors and the value of their neighbors' property, and they could hurt local economies. And so why do we do brownfields redevelopment? Well, it's good for the economy because it generates jobs, increases property values, leads to investment, and increases tax base, which you can use to fund environmental and equity measures. For the environment, you can preserve or develop open space. You can clean up sites. You can promote environmentally sustainable practices and improve the quality of life of your neighborhoods. And for equity, studies show that many of these underutilized properties are in communities that are also affected by poor people are affected by these, disproportionately affected by these sites. So it helps with equity as well. And the barriers for brownfields include really are the cost and time and the fear of liability. The issues are, you don't know how much it will cost to assess, you don't know how much it costs to clean up, and how it might affect the market value and your earnings. And the implications are you need investments to assess and clean up a site. And that's what the brownfields funds are for. So in Hawaii, you have a set of resources as well as the EPA later will also explain what resources are there for brownfields. So I'm going to hand it off now to Melody Kalisay with the Department of Health, who will be talking about brownfields in the state of Hawaii's point of view.